Hello everyone. Last time I left you, I said we were going to be talking about the most controversial character from my favorite video game of last year. So just to clarify, we're talking about a controversy and a controversial character that I actually think has some type of merit for discussion, as opposed to the question of whether or not coming up with a narrative excuse to put an out-of-place, scantily clad uniform on your female character justifies making that character into a sex object. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. Additionally, we are not talking about whether or not the inclusion of additional LGBTQ representation in modern updates of older games is a good or bad thing. Spoiler alert, it's probably a good thing. But I wanted to talk about a discussion that I think really asks the question of what the value of certain video game narratives are, and where we want video game narratives to go from here, and what people can learn from existing narratives. So, all the spoiler alerts, we're going to be talking about Undertale. And I cannot highlight spoiler alert enough. I might actually use the YouTube editor to put a gigantic spoiler alert over this portion of the video, because I'm going in deep, because we're going to be talking about Chara. Now, there seems to be at least some division in the Undertale fandom as to who Chara is and what their nature is. On the one hand, you have a lot of players who see Undertale as a game about mercy and understanding and redemption. And so to them, the idea that Chara can't be redeemed seems against the message of the game. You know, it strikes them that there's enough information and enough hints in Chara's story that Chara themselves might be considered a victim, and at which point they're still responsible for their actions, but they still deserve a second chance. And then on the other hand, you have members of the fandom that see Chara as just this anathema, this, demonic beast that represents all of the negative things in Undertale. All of the hatred, anger, and misunderstanding that drives the narrative and drives the redemption process that we see in the game. So, who's right? Can we know who is right? Well, first of all, one thing I'd like to point out, and I've pointed this out before, is I'm almost certain that Toby Fox and Andrew Hussey exchanged ideas quite a bit when it came to working on their respective projects. As you know, Toby Fox actually began working on Undertale in Andrew Hussey's basement. So, every so often I see narrative parallels between Homestuck and Undertale. And this appears to be one of them. Andrew Hussey specifically made the character Vriska to be a controversial character, a point of contention and discussion within the fandom. And it makes me wonder if Toby Fox did the same thing with Chara. And the way Toby Fox did it, I think, is really, really clever. Because you can legitimately say there are actually two Charas in Undertale. It may legitimately be that both sides of the fandom are right. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's take a look first at the pacifist run. Here we find Chara as an actual person within the narrative. They serve a purpose within that narrative, and they have certain things detailed about them, a backstory, a personality, etc., and so on. We don't actually see the full story, but we're able to piece together a pretty good version of it at this point, I think. So, the monsters have been underground for who knows how long at this point. You know, it would strike most people to think when you see the opening credit roll that this initial war between monsters and men took place in some type of legendary age, like an Arthurian period, and so you might be looking at somewhere between like 1000 and 1500 AD. So somehow the seal on Mount Ibo, as I pronounce it, maintains and keeps the monsters hidden and locked away underground for however long that period of time is. Then, sometime between 2010 and 2020, Chara flees their village, climbs Mount Ibot, and falls into the underground. There are some fans who have suggested that there might have been something sinister going on here. But all we know for a fact is that Chara's reason for climbing Mount Ibot, according to Azrael, was not a good one. And whatever their experiences were out in our world before entering the underground, they resulted in Chara hating humanity. Just despising humanity. Now keep in mind, Chara is a child. All 8 humans are described as children. So, at this point, just because Chara hates humanity does not mean that I have to apologize for that if I ever slip up on that. When I first started playing Undertale, I interpreted the main character as feminine. So, occasionally I will slip up with the agender terms and use the feminine terms instead. So, just an apology for that. I do understand that, you know, Chara and Frisk do not follow gender binary. So, anyway, back to the narrative. At this point, there's still plenty of reason to believe that Chara may have been a victim, and that even if not justified for their viewpoints, they at least should be worthy of a second chance or some type of redemption. So, continuing on with the story, Azrael finds Chara. We do not know what all of the initial reactions were to the presence of a human in the underground. It is possible that many monsters in the underground were initially judgmental of Chara, and that might have led to Chara starting to develop some type of hatred towards monsters as well. But the Dreamer family is implied to have accepted Chara into their household and treated them as one of their own. Azrael treated Chara as a sibling. They became fast friends. They spent all of their time together. And slowly the joy from this family radiated out through the underground, and it said that it filled the underground with hope. So far, very pleasant story. Doomed for tragedy, because Chara and Azrael decide to make their father his favorite butterscotch pie. Unfortunately, they use buttercups instead of cups of butter. This poisons Asgore. Asgore tells them that the buttercups are poisonous, at which point Chara devises a terrifying scheme to even consider a child devising. Chara decides to poison themselves with the buttercups to the point where they will perish, with the intention that Asriel will absorb their soul, they will cross the barrier, find 6 more human souls, come back, free all the monsters, happy ending. Except for the 6 humans that they end up killing. Asriel, trusting Chara, agrees to go along with this plan. They start to proceed with the plan. Chara dies, Asriel absorbs the soul, they get to the village, and Chara starts to lash out from within Asriel at the village. Asriel realizes that Chara's intentions are to destroy the entire village. He manages to take Chara's body back into the underground, but is mortally wounded in the process, dies. Asriel eventually becomes Flowey. Chara's soul appears to be lost until somehow it makes connection with Frisk, and our story proper begins. So when you look at that narrative, there is still plenty of room to believe that Chara is not innately evil, that Chara is redeemable, and since the themes of Undertale are themes of understanding and mercy and redemption, why then would you exclude Chara from those themes? Well, the answer is simple. Because of Chara number 2. So, we have a character within the narrative, and then we have a character that is supposed to be a Link-style connection between the player and Undertale itself. The very name, Chara, is derived from character. As in, you fill out your name on a character select screen, you are filling out your character's name. When asked what name you should enter for the fallen human when you begin Undertale, Toby Fox has always had the same response. You should input either your name or a name that is of personal significance to you. So, Chara may have the canon name, Chara, but the actual intended name of that character is your name. That is the name that character is supposed to have. You are supposed to connect to the fallen human. This not only through the narrative chicanery that Toby Fox plays, where it turns out the character you named was never Frisk all along. It not only connects you to Frisk, letting you see Frisk as your link to the underground, even though Frisk is their own character, but it connects you to Chara, making that creepy scene in the True Pacifist run all the more impactful when Asriel is speaking to you instead of to another character in the narrative. But where it really becomes important is in the Genocide run. When you get through the Genocide run, if you are capable of beating Sans, then you meet Chara. But this Chara is not the narrative Chara. Although in many ways Chara acts like the narrative Chara. You begin to see Chara's thoughts intrude upon your character and the description of things in the game. So for example, one thing we know about Chara is Chara likes chocolate. So when you check the fridge, Chara mentions that there isn't any chocolate and seems disappointed by this. When you look in the mirror, Chara eventually reflects that it is them, Chara, not Frisk. Eventually, Chara is taking over Frisk through the path of the genocide run. And you can even see this in game mechanics. In the pacifist run, Frisk doesn't really do anything that you don't directly tell Frisk to do through inputs. But in the genocide run, Frisk will just interrupt conversations, will move without being told to move. The whole point of this is to show that Chara is taking over. But it's not the Chara from the narrative, or at least you could make an argument that it's not. Because one of the purposes behind you naming this character personally is you are supposed to feel the connection. So when you get to the end, it's not, hi, it's me, Chara. Hi, it's you. You are the one standing in the black screen after Asgore and Flowey die. That is your mirror standing there looking back at you and telling you that who is this strange child before you? It's not a narrative construct. It's a part of you. It's that feeling you get when you successfully ding in an RPG. It's that feeling you get every time you overcome a tough battle. Even the actual battle with Sans, if you watch how people play that battle, they start off at the genocide run just filled with emotion. They are still just completely overcome by the emotion of what they are doing. And then through the fight with Sans, that emotion slowly fades away. It becomes more and more and more about beating Sans. You forget about the narrative. You forget about the characters. Even though Sans is continuing to plead with me, you start skipping dialogue. You start ignoring him and focus only on victory. You are literally becoming Chara yourself as you fight Sans. It's one of the most beautiful things. And if you want to see this like completely and totally happen, just a full transformation, watch Mando Pony play the genocide run. Watch how he acts as he continues to fight Sans. Even Dodger, who lost far more times than Mando Pony did, managed to keep more of her humanity and empathy towards the characters. Whereas Mando Pony just completely and totally embraced the gamer, I am going to beat this. This game is not going to be the end of me. And by the time it's all said and done, he doesn't care what happens at the end of the narrative, and he is easily ready to erase the game. The genocide version of Chara is not the narrative version of Chara. It's you. It's an aspect of yourself that we have been trained with through so many years of gaming. So you literally have one character with two distinct and important purposes in the narrative. One is a character within the narrative whose story and whose path is extremely important to the background of the narrative and all of the events that take place. The other is a metaphor for you as a gamer who is playing this game and slowly becoming more focused on the victory instead of empathizing with the characters and the narrative. And in the end result, if you give in to Chara, you end up erasing the game. And if you decide you need to play again, then you have to commit the one act that will permanently change the game. Unless, of course, you hack it. So, this, I believe, is where the huge controversy comes from for Chara. They have two distinct purposes, and because of that, some fans are going to latch on, especially if they don't play the genocide run. Some fans are going to latch on to that narrative Chara and ask the question, the very honest question, was Chara redeemable? Why in this game about mercy and redemption is Chara not allowed to be saved, whereas the others will latch on to the powerful metaphor that Toby Fox is using Chara for, and will understand that for the purpose of Undertale's story, for the purpose of the themes and messages Undertale is trying to get across to you, the player, Chara is the ultimate evil. Something that is not only past redemption, but is completely irredeemable by the very nature of what they represent. Woo! So, that is Chara and Undertale. I hope you enjoy this viewpoint. I don't know if you've seen this viewpoint somewhere else before. I know I hadn't. But I hope this gives you a new idea as to both the brilliance that Toby Fox managed to bring across in his game, and to the discussion and argument about what Chara's nature was in the game, and whether she should be redeemed or abhorred. And again, I screwed up and said she instead of they. Sorry. Again, that's just because of how I first played the game, before I knew anything about Undertale. So, thank you if you got this far. I think I'm going to talk about movies the next time we meet. I think it's time that I finally put my own 2 cents towards the whole concept of the superhero fight. So until then, this is Divine Erdrick signing out. Thank you all so much. I hope you had fun.